Welcome to A Slice of SEL, a podcast for educators about social emotional learning.
Welcome to A Slice of SEL. We're the SEL services team at the St. Croix River Education District, plus a very special guest. I'm Nick, and if you're a repeat listener, it probably sounds like I'm smiling and laughing at the beginning of every episode, because I am, because we always try it first, make a mistake, and then have to restart, and that's why I'm always have a smile and a laugh to my voice tone.
I'm Rye.
And I'm Courtney. We are very excited to welcome our very first guest, Nicole Woodward. Welcome, Nicole.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Yay.
Literally could not be more happy to be here.
So Nicole...
Mega fan.
We're extremely excited for Nicole to be here. Nicole is our beloved Director of Special Education at SCRED, and she joined us to talk about our theme at the St. Croix River Ed District for the year, which is Grace, Grit, Growth. And as you may know, we're in the midst of a self-care series, and we're focusing specifically on emotional well-being and resilience for educators. And I'd say that theme of grace, grit, and growth fits very well within what we've been covering, and it's extremely relevant for the year we're in. So we're excited about that.
But before we dive in, what is filling our buckets today, guys? Nicole, would you please go first as our honored guest?
I would love to. Highlight of the podcast. Filling my bucket, honestly, is being here. Because you guys have met me before. Love a good performance. Also mega podcast fan and Slice of SEL. And so I'm like looking at a recording board. I feel like I'm a little bit in a studio, albeit virtually. And I just feel like it is all of the things that I love, including some of my favorite people. So being here with you guys, filling the bucket to the brim.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Yeah.
I'll go next. What's filling my bucket today is I received a midday surprise in my email when when the notification came across that said my sister-in-law had sent me a Caribou Coffee gift card for no reason other than today is Wednesday. So it was just a good pick-me-up in the middle of the day.
That's nice. I remember in one of our early episodes, one of your filling your buckets was a surprise pay it forward at a coffee shop. So this seems to happen to you like 300, 400% more than the average bear.
I mean, everyone loves coffee.
Every day's a good
Courtney,
day.
what about you?
Oh, well, I was having a tough time thinking about this, but last night I was watching my show that I'm currently binging, The Crown, and my house was very dark, and normally I have lights on all over, and my porch lights are on, but since it was so foggy, the porch lights were off already, and my neighbor texted me and said, "Hey, I just want to check in, are you okay?" And I just thought that was the cutest thing, because my house was so dark, she was just checking to make sure we were good, so It's nice to have a great neighborhood, so my neighborhood is filling my bucket.
Love that.
What about you, Nick?
Well, I can't believe that this one fell to me, but I'll take it. It's filling my bucket. We're recording this before Thanksgiving break, on the eve of Thanksgiving break, and as educators, we are thrilled that it's Thanksgiving break. It's just going to be really nice to have a couple of days to rest and recharge. I know I've mentioned before in previous episodes about the hilarious TikTok, Instagram teachers who brighten my day by making me laugh, and one of them was talking about the state of the state with educators and teachers heading into Thanksgiving break, and she was just saying I'm dead, I'm alive but I'm dead, and she was just her between standing in front of her smartboard and then just laying on the ground in front of it, and it's just that sounds about right. Everyone's pretty exhausted, and she said in the description that she's basically living off Cheetos and energy drinks heading into Thanksgiving break. So everyone across the country, if we're heading into Thanksgiving break, are just thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So let's shift to our main topic. So SCRED's theme for the year is Grace, Grit, Growth.
So yeah, before we get into the topic, we thought we'd approach it by talking about grace, grit, and then growth. But before we get into that, collectively, that whole phrase, let's talk about why would we even have a theme for the year? What's the purpose of that? And as I was thinking about this last night, I was thinking we haven't really talked on the podcast yet about positive affirmations. Another word you may have heard for that is a mantra. It's like a short phrase that you can repeat to yourself, and it brings you calm or it brings you positivity, kind of whatever you want. And just examples of that would be like, right now, right here, everything is okay. Or I'm imperfect, I'm enough. Just these little reminders that we give ourselves and repeat to ourselves. And I think grace, grit, and growth as a theme for our organization for this year is kind of like a positive affirmation for everyone. It's just some really key things that we want to be able to remember and repeat to ourselves all the time, to remind ourselves of, because they're really important things to keep at the forefront of your mind during this really difficult, challenging year when we're all grieving and facing constant changes and trying to weather the storm together. So that was what I took from it as kind of the purpose, Nicole. What do you think? I mean, you're the one who came up with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, those mantras, things we tell ourselves. And then, when I think about this particular positive affirmation and the impact it has and the intention of bringing it forward is not only like that kind of self-personal positive affirmation, but creating some connectedness and unity around something at a time when we're so disconnected, so we've got this organization in these 6 districts and we're all in different places under typical circumstances. And then now with the pandemic, we've been in our homes and we can't go into buildings in the same way that we're used to. And that like connectedness is impacted by all of that. And so having a mantra that we can use and that we're all saying in that shared common language, I just think is a really beautiful way to create that connection with the humans that we care about and work with every day.
So first, let's talk about grace. Nicole, what made you want to include grace in the theme for the year?
Well, I think the first thing is that, I didn't set out to plan a theme for the year. It all happened really organically. And I just remember sitting at the kitchen table in August, generally fretting over all that was happening and the guidance that I needed to bring forward, conversations that were happening that were really challenging and difficult. None of us have done a pandemic in education before, or really a pandemic in life before. And so there was no manual, and we were, sifting through hundreds of pages of guidance in all these different places, and people were trying to make decisions and do the right thing as guidance was rolling in. And it was really stressful. And in my position, I'm typically responsible for like answering the questions and bringing forward the guidance and telling people how we're going to do this. And I was just fretting over it, and really wanted to, bring it forward in a way that was consumable and that people could just like understand what was before us and what we needed to do, but be calm about it. I knew people were frantic and I didn't want to add to that. And so, I'd had a tough conversation and then spent some time drafting some guidance and then brought it forward to the team. And I just said, first and foremost, like, we just need to let people know that there's grace here. We just like, it's going to be hard, but like, there's so much grace because we're all learning this together. So like when we're talking to teams, and it really just came from this very strong desire to make sure that people knew that even though this was all new and they were learning and there were hard questions and not perfect answers, that we just had to do our best. We just had to get going. And like that there was grace, knowing that there was no perfect way to do it because we've never done it before. And so we just need to try and to give ourselves grace and ask for grace if we don't have the information that we need right at the onset. So it just really came from a desire to bring calm and give permission for imperfection as we got started in a year that we knew was going to be completely imperfect and different.
Yeah, I love that, because when I hear grace, grit, growth, like it really does bring like a sense of calm, like just comes over me. So I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think grace of those 3, I mean, right at the outset, is probably the one that I hear day to day most often.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, we want to talk about just how do we practice this, because the important part of this, and I know you said this to me directly before, Nicole, like the intention of this wasn't to be like gimmicky or be like a Hallmark card kind of deal where, it sounds good,
right,
but it doesn't really like impact us day to day. We aren't really living it. Like the point was to help people
right,
live it and understand what that means. And we appreciate that part of it. So just like before the podcast, when we were messing with audio settings and stuff, and you joining us and just figuring all that out, I know one phrase we used was like grace given, because we're all making mistakes these days. And I think this year especially, like our competence and our confidence is being challenged all the time, because we're constantly confronting these situations we've never been in before. And normally where you might be an experienced educator and think like, I'm on my game and I nail most things in a day, like you just don't have that stability in 2020 for the most part. Like we're all it's like we're brand new in a lot of cases, so you're gonna make mistakes, and it's important to remind ourselves and just use those words like, hey, grace given, and then just grace accepted. It might sound a little cheesy to some people, but like it just is important, and to a lot of us I think it really sounds good and feels good to get that message.
Really important. I mean, I think about our most experienced veteran teachers who had a highly refined practice, and then all of the space and the structures that refined practice existed in were stripped away, right? And they had to completely change. And so strategies that they used and relied on at one point were no longer available to them. And I also think about novice and brand new teachers who have no, like, the structure that you would typically use to bring them on board and get them where they needed to go was not available. And so not only are they learning to be a new teacher, they're doing that while everyone else is learning around them too. And so again, it's just like grace, just you have to do your best, and just try and get going, and we're going to meet you there.
And I think the really challenging part of it, when I think about it, and this has come up in the podcast before as we've been discussing things, is finding the balance, and then your personal balance in relation to your colleagues' balance and your principal's balance and everyone you're working with balance, because we're imperfect. We're also enough. We're going to make mistakes. We also want to serve the kids the best we can. So we have these goals that feel like they're conflicting sometimes. Like, I want to give myself grace and accept my flaws, but I also want to show up and do my best and help myself like meet my professional goals, serve these kids. All of that matters. So finding the balance and the perfect point, and it's always changing. So one thing I was thinking of that we've talked about, not on the podcast yet, but the idea of what is in my control versus out of my control. And that's a really important distinction to make. So, for example, you don't control the students you're working with and how much they engage and show up and what their attendance looks like. At the end of the day, like, you don't control that. You can strongly influence it, but like, if you think of a circle in your head, like the stuff that I directly control is in that circle and everything else is outside of it. Like, the choices I make within that circle, like how I design my instruction, how I schedule things, what my instruction, the contents of it look like, how much I'm calling parents, like all that is in my control. But there are a lot of things that I care about deeply that are really outside that circle of control. And just the balance is really important. It's really distressing because they're things that you deeply care about. Like, as parents, you could say that too. Like, I care so deeply about the well-being of my children. At the end of the day, especially as they get older, like, I have less and less direct control over the choices they make. And it's not okay then to just release that responsibility and say, like, well, I don't control that, so I don't have any way, so I can just let it go. Well, like, that's not how human beings work. So it's like, I don't control my students' engagement or how much they're learning, but that doesn't mean I'm okay with letting all that go and just releasing that responsibility.
Right. I think that's such a good point. And I think when I think about how grace has really evolved, right, this started as a statement I used in a presentation, and it has just taken on this life form that I never really expected, right? Like, it just has happened, again, so organically. But when I think about where grace has really had its most profound power is when in the stuck point in finding that balance. So when I have a teacher come to me and they're fretting and they're upset or crying, and I can start with, okay, first things first, grace, and we've tried to put some terms over time to, like, what does grace look like? And it does look like letting it go, not the responsibility, but the burden, whatever it is that's weighing us down, whatever part that's beyond our control or, making us lose sleep at night, like letting it go as a way to show grace, either to someone else or yourself. giving yourself permission to maybe like take care of yourself or do something nice, or giving yourself an affirmation like, I am a good teacher, even though this is hard, or like, I've never done this before, so I'm just learning, whatever it might be. But showing that little bit of grace can really bring defenses down. It can just unstick us so that we can be open to that next part about like moving forward, showing up, taking the responsibility, whatever it might be. And that's how I've really appreciated the role that term has played in how we've carried out this year, and our support for teachers, the work that we've done ourselves. It's just helped move us beyond those places that keep us kind of bogged down. Yeah,
and I appreciate everything you said, and I think those reminders, like I'm doing my best, is one I wrote down of just things we need to remind ourselves of, and when we're giving ourselves grace, because we are. We're all doing our best, and it's so much of it is new. And when we hit those stuck points, that is a good reminder, like, give myself grace. I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Right.
So shifting to grit, same question, Nicole. What was your thought process for including that word?
Yeah, I think these were the two first words that kind of came to be. And it was seeking that grace. And then, to use that balance, analogy that you talked about, Nick, it's, yes, we need to give grace, but we also have to get the job done. And it's going to be a hard one, So, let's talk about grit and what that means. And we brought forward, the concept of tenacious persistence, rolling your sleeves up and really diving into the work, even though it's hard, knowing that it's aligned with our passions and our values. And anytime we're doing something aligned with our passions and values, and to have a great impact on our world, on our community, in our profession, it takes grit. It's not easy work. And so we wanted to be really upfront with people that like, this is hard. Enduring a pandemic for months, we all were coming in with a lot of hope that things would be different in the fall. Remember back to the spring, and we were like, okay, this is temporary. Like, let's just get to the summer, right? And then fall will be better. And then it wasn't. And oh man, so we had to think about the fact that we have to be upfront when things are going to be hard. Sugarcoating it doesn't help anybody. So, we're going to load on the resources, we're going to load on the support, but we really wanted people to know that. I don't know, in my life, like I'm no stranger to tough things. I've had loss, I've had to work hard, and, it can be really tempting to just kind of throw your hands up. But man, the biggest rewards are reaped when we push through. And so I really wanted people to know, like, you have guts, you can do this, have courage and just keep pushing and know that you're not doing it on your own. Like, we're all pushing the boulder up the proverbial mountain here together. But I think when you can be transparent with people about what's to come, it's helpful. And then we can kind of come together around that. And so, when we've had people come forward with something that's hard and they're upset, it's the grace. And then it's like, okay, now let's shift to the grit. And like, how can we equip you to do the hard work?
And this, honestly, to like pull back the curtain a little bit, spend some time meditating before the podcast and thinking about how we can talk and speak to how do we live these things again. And this was a tough one. And I don't want to dive down a little nerdy rabbit hole. But if you're familiar with the word grit, like Angela Duckworth is an academic who is really like championing and behind that word, written many books about it. TED Talks you may have heard. It's a big word in education. She defines it as passion and perseverance, and passion is sustained interest for something. Perseverance is continuous effort. There's a lot of wonderful arguments, if you want to dive down a nerdy rabbit hole out there, about, the value of this word grit in relation to perseverance, because there's, we get jargony, like there's a lot of different words for what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Like perseverance is one, tenacity, persistence, stick-to-itiveness, like this general idea that we need to like keep going and keep pushing and sustain and not give up. Like that's an attractive idea in general in education that we try and impart to our students. Like, you're going to get farther in life if you are able to stick to things and keep working, keep pushing. So whatever word we attach to it, I think like behind it, we get that same idea, and we know how valuable that is for our students. And then we know we need to work that ourselves. I think that the tough part is, like, how much do we have control over that, and how much does that actually work? Because it's not mechanical, you know, it's not like we have this like hidden cylinder of grit that we just need to flip a switch, like, you know, NOS on an engine in a Fast and the Furious movie, and we get this extra like boost of grit, and that carries us forward until the vaccines kick in. Like, that's not how it works. Like, we're human beings, we're messy. So like, how do we actually churn out more grit to keep us going? So I had some thoughts about what that actually means. I think there's overlap with resilience. And in the last couple episodes, I think we're on episode 5 now, we've been talking about emotional resilience. And what does that mean? That means like weathering the storm, bouncing back when we have setbacks. And to do that, we need to manage our stress. So like, we're in the midst of months and months and months of chronic stress, like cortisol and adrenaline are running through our systems a lot more than they typically do. That is really hard on our bodies. It starts to affect our moods in ways like that kind of creates a vicious cycle. Like, it's easier to get frustrated because I've been frustrated or anxious or worried for so long. So these habits that we build are really important, because it's hard to make choices. Like, we're in the middle of a workday remotely, and you can go from meetings one after another. And like, I teach a class, then I have a meeting 5 minutes later, then I teach another class. And like, normally there would be these natural breaks and opportunities to take a breath or talk to a colleague next door, and they're just harder to create for yourself. So engineering small habits that are sustainable to manage that stress, I think, is really so important right now, because making these tiny little choices throughout the day, like, it's not sustainable for a lot of people. Like, that's the difference to me between a habit and just choices. Like, right. It takes a lot of willpower to make these decisions. Like, I'm going to pause working on this, I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to shift, and I'm going to go talk to my spouse for 10 minutes or take a walk for 15 minutes. Like, creating space for that takes a lot of energy and willpower that we don't have a lot of right now. So thinking about realistic habits you can form that are going to sustain you, so you can sustain your resilience, like, that's something that we can control. It's really, really hard, but it is something that is valuable.
Yeah, I think, I don't think grit is just, bearing your head and just doing it. I don't know that that's what grit looks like. I think part of it too is knowing, what you're going to need to sustain you through it, the breaks, taking care of yourself, relieving that stress, but also collaboration and, asking for help when you need it, and recognizing that grit doesn't mean doing it by yourself. It means persisting. It means, or, getting to that bigger goal, and how do you need to do that? And what do you need to get there? And recruiting those supports along the way. And so we really wanted to illustrate that too, is that we're here, we're ready. What do you need? We're all in this together. And we can help push that boulder up the mountain. We can try to find a different path that might be a little bit easier. And we can do this. We can take this in pieces, right? Knowing that we are going to sustain. Reprieve isn't like at our fingertips. This looks like it's going to carry on for a while. So let's get to work together was really where we wanted to kind of take that part of the mantra.
Well, and that idea of collaboration and connection really dovetails into the other thing that came to mind when thinking about like, how do we make grit actionable, is motivation. Like, there's a lot of conversation in the nerdy literature about motivation versus grit and how they relate to each other. And we've talked, not on the podcast yet, again, but in several kind of videos we've made for people about student motivation. And intrinsic motivation is that inner fire that really keeps us going, and it's sustainable long term. And if you break that down, belonging is really important to it. So the sense that like, I'm with other people, we're learning and growing together. So connecting with your colleagues, and like we've talked about, just networking time is so important for educators right now more than ever, just sharing ideas and just that sense that we're in this together. And then caring about what we're doing. And that sounds like, oh, of course I care about what I'm doing. Like, I got into teaching for a reason. But like breaking that down, it's like the work connects to my goals. So like what I'm doing with distance learning right now, what I'm doing with these students connects to my goals of why I got into being a teacher. Like mentally making those connections and reminding yourself is how we can stay motivated. And then autonomy and control, like that idea, coming back to it, of what we control versus what we don't, like finding the things, the choices that I can make about like how I'm designing my instruction, or how I'm contacting people, or how I'm reaching out to students to build these relationships. Like that all matters to maintaining your motivation. And then feeling successful is that third ingredient. And it's not being successful. Like we talk about this, like it's not about winning a gold medal all the time. It's about a growth mindset, because like even when we don't win that gold medal, we can still feel like we're successful. So like I might not be like, I might look at student achievement data and have this huge grief and loss, like, oh my gosh, these numbers like that I'm used to increasing are not. And like that takes a gut punch to me, like, because I don't feel successful. But like you just have to like I think remind yourself of what we're going through, and like give yourself grace, and this all comes together. Like, I'm doing my best. I am being successful with these kids. What is mattering right now to them? And I'm giving that to them.
Right. One of the things we've really tried to do to kind of, again, align with the message is prioritize the tasks that need attention at any given time, right? To like, right now, just like do this part, like do this. And then when you've got that, move to this. And part of it is just like, when you look at it at this, I'm educating in a pandemic and this isn't what I signed up for. Like that can just get way overwhelming and just leave you feeling depleted, and like that you're not going to be able to make progress there. But if you can prioritize and think about the thing that's the most important first and has the biggest impact, and address that and find success there, and like check that off. I don't know that there's ever any like permanent checking, but you know, like it can really make you feel like, okay, like that part I've got, and now I can move to this part and I feel accomplished and I found some success there and a strategy, or I made a connection or had a breakthrough of my own practice. I didn't think that I could get there, and it'll carry, I mean, it's really energizing and can carry you forward to that next hard
This
thing.
all reminds me of when I would help my kids and try to get my students in my classroom to go along and do something that was really difficult for them. Like as teachers, we know to help our students think like this, break it up into small manageable pieces, build some behavioral some success. Like we know how to tell, we know how to tell our kids to do it, but it's super important to like look back at ourselves and give ourselves the same permission we would give our students.
That's so much harder, isn't it? Like we're so good at being like, I could tell you something that will be really helpful. Go do that. And then meanwhile over here, I'm like, you know, just drowning. So yeah, I think that's so important that we turn that back on ourselves and give ourselves that same permission to do those types of things and break it apart and just make progress, do the best we can when we can do it.
All right, and finally we come to growth. So Nicole, what inspired you to include the word growth, besides the fact that it starts with a G?
Yeah, other than an affinity for alliteration. You know, when we were working on just kind of heading into this school year, you know, the theme, you know, we kind of kept hearing like, don't give me anything, like nothing new. And like, we're overwhelmed again, back to like, everyone's so stressed and upset and already stressed coming in. And we were coming off a summer break, right? Like we're usually coming in off a summer break feeling like pretty good and like, hey, holler, how was your break? High five. And people were already depleted because they knew what the spring was like. We were heading back into something similar. And people just kind of wanted to just not look at anything additional and keep it really focused. And we had to start there. But even focusing on the here and now was a whole lot of new. You know, we had to do our paperwork differently. We had to set our schedules differently. We were being asked by our state department and, you know, the federal Department of Education, like we were being asked to be creative and do better than we did in the spring. Right. And so we had to learn and grow in that. And so we really wanted to invite a growth mindset from the beginning for various reasons. We've learned a lot since in the few months since spring, and we might need to be doing things differently than we did before, right? Even so, what was right in March and in April was the right way, but now we've learned something, so we have to shift. Or we need to expand our practices to reach the kids we weren't able to reach in the spring. And that takes growth. We're going to have to change. We have to adapt because everything around us has changed. And, kind of talking back like I did before about our veteran teachers who had all of those familiar structures stripped away and our brand new teachers, like there was a lot of learning that had to get done. So we just wanted to invite that so that, people knew that we're going to keep things focused on the here and now to the greatest extent possible. But we're all learning and changing in this. And what we know today is probably going to be different than what we know tomorrow. And so, we hang in there with us and just making sure that people were aware that we were going to need to change and to grow and to continue to expand our knowledge and our skills to meet the needs of this ongoing pandemic situation.
Yeah. When I think of, all we're needing to learn about technology and engagement in a virtual space and SEL strategies, I think on one hand, it does bring me some hope because it is good work and it's going to yield good things in a post-pandemic world, I think. And, I also think humans rightly have a pretty complicated relationship with growth that comes from difficult experiences, things that we wouldn't have jumped into if we were given the choice. And there has been a lot of loss and we are all grieving. And at the same time, we're also growing and doing good work and learning new things. And, yes, some wonderful things are going to come from that long term. And I think just coming to terms with that duality of loss and then on the other side, growth is tough. And it's okay to feel grief and hope at the same time or to flip between those two. And feeling one of those things doesn't invalidate the other. But I think there is definitely room there to be open to that growth and to allow ourselves to see this extremely challenging year through the perspective of opportunity. And we wouldn't have signed up for this, but I do appreciate with the word growth in the theme, that reminder to view things with a growth mindset.
Right. Yeah. No, I think, we've been keying into that. Like, man, I wonder what this, how this will impact our practice permanently, right? We all get into patterns of practice. We all do things, in a certain way because that's what's comfortable. It's what's familiar to us. And now we've been forced into this very uncomfortable, unfamiliar situation where we have to learn this new set of skills or maybe look at things differently than we did before, not as narrowly because social emotional well-being and academics, they've smushed together in a way that they never have before in the current situation. And so how will that really equip us for being more effective educators in the future? I think about a large part of my job is facilitating professional learning and meetings. Like I do that under normal circumstances. And then I have to do it via Zoom all day, every day. And I've had to learn a whole new set of skills for getting engagement and getting feedback and input and participation because I'm not able to hold a microphone and dance around a room like I typically do. I'm stuck behind a screen and so is everyone else. But a lot of those skills are going to serve me well once we're able to resume more normal practices because I've seen the benefits now. I was forced to do them differently. I had to have a growth mindset because there was no other way I wasn't going to be able to do my job unless I did that. And so I think about that a lot when I think about the growth aspect of this, that man, it's hard to grow and it can be really uncomfortable, but we've been forced into this opportunity where we have to. And then how will it carry us forward into the future, to do better for kids and better for each other. And that makes me excited. That gives me energy.
All right. So normally, we do takeaways at the end of the podcast, but Nicole, as our guest, this is all about your theme and it's your honor to do our takeaways today.
Well, an honor indeed. I think, again, like we didn't set out to say, okay, what mantra will we bring forward this year? You know, what are we going to say that's really going to get them going? Like, that wasn't where this came from. It really did come from a very, I keep using the word organic. I can't find another one right now. So grace, you know.
Grace given.
Thank you. But, you know, it just came from all of those experiences that we were having as we were preparing for the start of the school year, and recognizing that those experiences were shared with other educational leaders that we were consulting with, were going to be shared with the teachers when they came back, were shared with even like the State Department and other leaders that were providing the information. And so it came from a really real place. And it started as a way to frame up the year once we found it. You know, I said it out loud just to my team, and I was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. And we just got to do it like with a whole lot of grace, loads of grit. You know, it's going to be a lot of growth. And they were like, say that, you know, like say that. So we did. And it was a way to kick things off and really open our hearts and our minds to everything that was before us, and assure our teachers and our educational leaders that we truly were in this together. So that's where it started, but it's really grown into something much larger, and it's getting infused into all aspects of our practice. It's coming up in small conversations and big meetings. I'm signing off on emails. I'm bringing it into real moments where we're just kind of stuck, or people are overwhelmed or looking for the next step. And, you know, it's just, there's palpable relief when the phrase comes forward. It's been a connector. You know, when things have not gone quite right, or we are unsure of where to go next, like, we remind ourselves that this is a process and we're in it together. We can do it better next time. We're, you know, giving color and meaning and merit to these words through our ongoing practice. And I feel like, you know, that's important to me, because it isn't just lip service. It's really intended to help shift hearts and minds to get through this, because we, at the end of this, because it is ending, I do believe that that's going to happen. We need our people. We need our students. We need them to be well. We need our teachers. We need them to be well. We need our leaders. We need them to be well. And so we have to have something to connect us to that, to come back to, and to carry us through, because it's wearing, you know, people are fatigued, and we need each other. And so we're living them. We're living the phrase. We're embracing it. We're lifting each other up and carrying each other through. And so I don't know if there's one thing that comes out of this conversation, I hope it's just, you know, some hope in that, and some realization that, like, we really can get through this. We need a little bit of grace, loads of grit, and a whole lot of growth. So.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Nicole. I know how much we appreciate it, and I just know that people who listen to the podcast are really going to enjoy hearing your thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Bucket overflowing. So much gratitude for all of you.
You are absolutely the best person to start this wonderful weekend with.
Oh, appreciate it.
To our listeners, thanks for spending time with us today as well. If you are listening on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, click the bell so that you're notified when new episodes are released each week. And we'll see you next time when you come back for another slice of SEL.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.